In the early 1900s, British economic policies were squeezing rural India. High taxes and recurring famines left thousands of Punjabi farmers looking for a way out of a cycle of debt. Many looked toward Canada, where the lumber industry was offering wages far higher than what was possible in Punjab. Because both India and Canada were part of the British Empire, these workers believed their status as British subjects guaranteed them the right to move between colonies. But the Canadian government was facing political pressure to keep the country white. They needed a way to block Indian migration without violating the official imperial policy that all British subjects were equal. To solve this, they implemented the Continuous Journey Regulation. The law stated that any immigrant arriving in Canada must have traveled directly from their country of origin on a single through ticket. This created a mathematical barrier. At the time, no steamship could carry enough coal to sail from India to Canada without stopping at a port in Japan or Hawaii to refuel. By mandating a non-stop trip, Canada made Indian migration legally impossible without ever mentioning race in the text of the law. Baba Gurdit Singh Sandhu, a wealthy businessman, decided to test this barrier. He chartered a Japanese steamship, the Komagata Maru, and sold tickets to 376 passengers. His goal was to arrive in Vancouver and force the Canadian courts to decide if the law could actually be enforced against British subjects. This wasn't a standard migration, it was a deliberate attempt to see if the British Empire's promise of equality would hold up under pressure. On May 23, 1914, the Komagata Maru arrived in Vancouver. For the passengers, the sight of the harbor felt like the end of a long struggle. But as the ship entered the port, Canadian authorities immediately surrounded it. Citing the Continuous Journey Regulation, they refused to let the passengers disembark, keeping the ship anchored in the middle of the harbor. The harbor became a floating prison. For 2 months, the passengers were kept on board in deteriorating conditions. Authorities strictly limited the delivery of fresh water and food, leaving hundreds to face thirst and hunger, staring at a city they were forbidden to enter. Local Indians already living in Canada formed a shore committee, raising $22,000 to pay for legal fees and supplies. They took the case to the British Columbia Court of Appeal, but the judges sided with the government, upholding the deportation order. To ensure the ship left, the Canadian government sent the HMCS Rainbow, a naval warship. Its crew aimed heavy cannons at the wooden passenger ship, signaling the state was prepared to use lethal force to protect its borders. The government achieved its goal through a combination of paperwork and the threat of military force. They had rejected 356 people based on a logistical technicality. The journey back took another 2 months. When the ship finally docked at Budge Budge near Calcutta, the passengers were exhausted. Waiting for them was the British Indian Police. The authorities were on high alert for anti-colonial activity, viewing these returning passengers not as citizens, but as revolutionaries linked to the Ghadar movement. The police tried to force the passengers directly onto trains bound for Punjab to keep them under surveillance. The passengers, wanting to go to the city or speak with officials, refused to board. The disagreement quickly turned into a massacre. Without an order to disperse, the police opened fire on the crowd of passengers. 20 people were killed in the chaos. Most of the survivors were rounded up and imprisoned, while Baba Gurdit Singh and a few others escaped into hiding. The journey that began as a legal challenge ended in blood. These passengers had been rejected by one part of the empire using bureaucracy, and then fired upon by another part using rifles. News of the massacre spread through the Ghadar Party's networks and into the villages of Punjab. The story of the ship that was turned away by cannons and welcomed back with bullets became a focal point for public anger. This anger fueled a shift in the independence movement. Many who had once believed in working within the British legal system began to see total independence as the only solution. The tragedy at Budge Budge became a recruitment tool, turning disillusioned subjects into active revolutionaries. More than a century later, in 2016, the Canadian government attempted to address this history. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stood in the House of Commons to issue a formal apology to the descendants of the passengers. An apology from a modern parliament recognizes the error, but it cannot change the reality of 1914. It cannot return the years spent in prison or restore the lives lost on the docks of Kolkata. The Komagata Maru remains a case study in how states use technicalities to enforce exclusion. It serves as a reminder that the laws which govern who belongs and who does not are often built on foundations that are never explicitly written down.